welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. It is never an unbusy day here. You guys may have been listening about this R. Kelly thing. Honestly, I didn't know who the guy was until last week, but I read a number of articles about it, and you may know that there's a lot of controversy here with regard to young ladies that are supposedly staying with him as to whether or not they've been abducted or haven't been abducted. I know it's a controversial and a very hot subject. From what I understand from many of the families of these young ladies, they are saying that this is completely out of character, that they wouldn't have contact with them. There have been many years of issues. There was a child pornography charge with R. Kelly years ago for which he was acquitted. There have been a number of instances of people alleging bad behavior. We have two very special guests here, and if you right now, at least one special guest is an attorney for Joycelyn Savage, is one of the young ladies, and her dad, Timothy Savage, hasn't seen her in 2 years, and they want to speak to Joycelyn. They want to make sure Joycelyn's okay. They want to make sure Joycelyn's not under Stockholm syndrome or something of that nature, and so they've hired a lawyer. It's Gerald Griggs, Esquire, and they had sent a demand letter to RK's lawyer saying they demand to speak to Joycelyn. Mr. Griggs, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So give me a little background here. Did I get it right? I mean, this segment just kind of got on my desk just a minute ago because you guys were so gracious to come here, and I know it's a hot subject matter, but what are your fears? What are your thoughts? What is Dad asking you to do?
Dad is asking me to reunite his daughter with his family. They haven't seen her in 2 years. We've reached out to Mr. Kelly and Mr. Kelly's camp multiple times over the last year, almost 5 times. And then we heard his new lawyer on national television saying nobody's reached out. So we sent a demand letter directly to him requesting that he place Joycelyn Savage on the first plane to Atlanta so they can meet with her and establish whether or not she is in a consensual relationship, which we believe she's not, with Mr. Kelly, and get to the bottom of what's happening.
Mr. Griggs, how old is Joycelyn?
She's 23 years old.
Okay, so she was certainly 21 or so, age of majority, when she wound up with this R. Kelly guy. I'm just curious, what makes people think, and I'm just asking the question many are asking, that there's something that's untoward going here? Is it because it's uncustomary that she wouldn't reach out? Like, is there any kind of evidence that you have that makes it appear as if she's being held against her will?
Yes, we have witnesses, we have text messages, we have video that beg to show the question of whether or not her staying with Mr. Kelly is voluntary. But we want to make very clear that we just want to speak to her at this point. We want to have sustained contact with her physically to determine her physical well-being, her mental well-being, and to determine whether or not the claims that we are getting about her staying with Mr. Kelly are true or not. So we are asking again where he will place her in direct contact with her family so we can determine what's actually happening.
Mr. Griggs, this obviously is a case that's captured the nation's attention. Very interesting and fascinating. You indicated that you had some information or some data that led you to believe there could be some foul play. What is that exactly? Witnesses,
digital evidence, video evidence. She's spoken to numerous people and sent numerous text messages that indicate that something is going on, and we want to get to the bottom of what that is.
Yeah, and you're saying that Joycelyn has actually communicated to these witnesses or sent text messages. Is that correct?
Yes, in the past she has.
Okay, is there any reason why she wouldn't have done the same thing with her parents?
That's a good question. I think only she can answer that, and that's why her parents are trying everything they know how. They've contacted Mr. Kelly's 2 previous managers, his 2 previous attorneys, and now this 3rd attorney directly to set up a meeting. We've gone to law enforcement to make sure we can accomplish a meeting, and we continue to cooperate with law enforcement to resolve this case as soon as possible.
Mr. Griggs, the text messages and communications that she's having with these other witnesses, are they from her phone or from somebody else's phone?
They're from her previous phone. She has now a new phone because that phone has been turned off, we believe, by Mr. Kelly.
And can you give me an idea of the nature of what's going on in those communications that lead one to believe there's foul play going on?
Well, she told one of her best friends that she's in fact being held against her will and she's in a sex cult. So that's just one of 3 or 4 witnesses that we have that have spoken directly to her, either over the phone or via text. over the past 2 years.
So there is a direct communication, at least one direct communication, maybe you can illuminate if there's more, where she is clearly indicating she's being held against her will. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's absolutely correct. And I have provided that witness directly to law enforcement.
Can I ask you, sir, what has been the response to law enforcement? I mean, that's a pretty, if I assume, by the way, you've captured that text on the other end, whoever that was sent to. Has law enforcement, right, has law enforcement had an opportunity to review it? And can you tell us, are you satisfied with what their response to this has been? Because my question becomes, as a former prosecutor myself, if there is a problem here and there is this sex, cult that's going on, and individuals are being advised or told or telling that they're being held against their will, that they're continuing to be victimized. What's law enforcement's response to this?
Not quite sure. It took a docuseries, a 6-part docuseries, for them to open actual criminal investigation. So I'm not completely satisfied with the response to law enforcement, but we continue to get witnesses and place them in front of law enforcement, and hopefully law enforcement will do their job. But there are at least 3 direct witnesses who have spoken directly to Joycelyn Savage, where she's indicated in the past that she was being held against her will and that she was a member of this harem.
Mr. Griggs, are you aware from your investigation and what you're trying to find out here, whether or not there's other similar evidence with other similarly situated women that's consistent with Joycelyn, i.e. being held against their will?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the 6-part docuseries kind of laid it right on out. It was an opening and closing statement with evidence in the middle. I think any prosecutor can put the witnesses that were in the documentary as well as the other witnesses that we have and get a conviction.
So you've seen the documentary. I haven't seen it, but for our audience that has not seen it, it is your opinion based upon your own independent investigation that that documentary was accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay, and have you dealt with, are you dealing just with the police or prosecutors in this case?
Both. We've dealt in the past with Johns Creek Police Department, and now we're currently dealing with the State's Attorney's Office in Chicago, as well as the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. And I must admit, they are being very forthcoming, and we're providing them with evidence. But I think that, the ship has already sailed on this. When Lifetime placed that docuseries out there, it's very well put together, but that was the 3rd docuseries. There was one by BuzzFeed, there's one by the BBC, actually 2 by the BBC, and there's been exposés that outline the last 25 years of incidents. So there are definitely similar transactions all over the place with this, and now they have victims.
Mr. Griggs, explain to me legally this demand letter and whether or not it has any jural effect. In other words, can you take action in court based upon what you're doing now, you personally?
No, we can't, because we don't have the victim. But what we can do is continue to show that Mr. Kelly's lawyer made some factually inaccurate statements. And now we are trying to show that this is not a consensual relationship, because if it's consensual, she will get in touch with her parents and we will be at the end of this. But if it's non-consensual, then there will be silence, just like there has been for the last 24 hours since it was sent.
Mr. Griggs, what concerns me, if I were to accept your version in a documentary series, and I have no reason to dispute it, I don't know the facts, but that as a prosecutor myself, getting back to the point that these women are continuing each and every day, every minute, every second, to continue to be victimized. Do you know whether or not law enforcement or the prosecutor's office have gone in to try to at least interview Mr. Kelly?
I think that they had a wellness check, which was very curious, to say the least, in his Chicago apartment in Trump Tower, where they interviewed the victims and the perpetrator in the same location. Now, you as being a prosecutor, me as being a defense attorney for almost 14 years, I've never heard of anything like that. You separate them, you take them to the station, you make sure they are, not in the same vicinity, and you ask tough questions. Didn't seem like Chicago did that, and so I'm definitely concerned about the nature of the investigation that's happening right now, but we will continue to cooperate to make sure that they have all of the witnesses so they can make a thorough determination. And if they don't make a thorough determination, then we will.
Well, Mr. Griggs, I agree with you 100% with respect to interviewing somebody in front of the alleged abuser. That's basic, not bad investigation 101. Just real quick, was that interview done with Mr. Kelly and those girls prior to the documentary or afterward?
This was after the documentary. I mean, nobody was really taking these allegations serious until the documentary. So after the documentary, they got a tip that he was holding individuals against their will. They went and did a wellness check, and they interviewed him and the two individuals who have now been later identified by news media, and said everything was fine. And I found it curious that they interviewed them in the same location at the same time.
Was Joycelyn one of those people interviewed?
I haven't independently been able to verify that, but media reports are saying that it was her.
Yeah, and interestingly, you also provided to the police and prosecutors these witnesses that have text messages from her indicating she's being held against her will, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, Mr. Griggs, listen, I think that you're doing tremendous work here. If, in fact, these girls are being victimized, it is amazing. There is not a more appropriate law enforcement response to it. Interviewing people in the presence of the alleged abuser is simply Neanderthalish as far as investigations are concerned. And it sounds like you have some pretty solid evidence that, at least with respect to Joycelyn, there's an issue there. So, sir, I wish you the best of luck. And please come back to the Law and Crime Network and update us. We would love to have you back on again, even with the father, too. We'd love to see what his point of view is.
Okay, I'll definitely keep you guys updated. And thank you for allowing us to be on your platform.
God bless, Mr. Griggs. Good luck to you, sir. Guys, it's a hot day here at the Law and Crime Network. We got some great trials going on, and we got to take a break, but stick with me and get in that chat room if you're not in there already.